Now, look, let's talk crime. The vast majority of Americans see crime as a huge issue in the US and approve of Donald Trump's handling of it. According to an AP NORC poll, 81% of Americans agree that crime is a major issue, including 96% of Republicans, 68% of Democrats, and 72% of independents, while 53% of Americans approve of the methods by which Trump is combating crime. You know, John, the left, they're all up in arms about this crackdown, particularly in Washington, D.C. But the reality is America wants this. This is exactly what America voted for.
Danica, it is a mystery why Democratic politicians in big cities will not take strong measures to combat crime. They have no cash bail. You know, it's a revolving door. Criminals get arrested. They put them right back out on the street. It's really appalling. And the natural consequence of that is sky-high violent crime rates. Now, in Washington, Donald Trump was able to do what he did because Washington is a unique jurisdiction. It is a federal district. It's the only place in America that's not part of a state. It is run by the federal government. And therefore, by law, Donald Trump had the ability to come in, take over the police force, bring in FBI agents and other federal law enforcement, and bring in the DC National Guard, which is under his command. And so that was a unique opportunity for him to come in and fight crime. Carjackings are down by 87% since this federal takeover in D.C. And so it's very popular. It's popular with people in D.C., and I think it's popular with people across the country.
Yeah, and note even the Washington, D.C. Mayor, Muriel Bowser, she even praised it, given that, yeah, as you said, that 87% reduction in carjackings in just the last 20 days alone. So the proof is absolutely in the pudding. Now, look, I want to talk to you about Alligator Alcatraz, the immigration facility, of course, in the Florida Everglades. Now, that will soon have no detainees in it. Officials will reportedly shut down that facility after a judge ordered them to cease operations. John, what do you make now of this development?
Well, the important thing to understand here, Danica, is that the basis of that court order was environmental. It had nothing to do with the use of the facility for deportees. It was that the judge held that certain environmental procedures hadn't been complied with. The federal government could appeal that order. I'm not sure they're going to. They might just say fine. They're opening up a number of other deportee centers around the country. I don't know that they necessarily need Alligator Alcatraz, but here's the real point that was going on, Danica. What they're trying to do is encourage self-deportation. You can't fly 10 or 15 million people out of the country. What you've got to do is impress upon them that it would be a good idea for them to leave the same way they came. And the administration has done that by publicizing things like Alligator Alcatraz. And I'm sure that's caused a lot of illegal immigrants to self-deport. And I think that's the real idea here.
Yeah, so maybe it actually has had the desired effect after all. You're spot on. Now, look, Donald Trump has held a White House meeting with former British Prime Minister Tony Blair and former Trump Middle East envoy Jared Kushner on ending the Gaza war. What do you make of Tony Blair being invited to give his views and his rationale for ending the Gaza war?
Danica, I really don't know. I mean, I assume he's being brought in because he's got a more pro-Israel orientation than Keir Starmer, the current prime minister, who is talking about recognizing Palestine, whatever that is, whatever its borders might be, whatever its government might be. I think that Trump is trying to help the Israelis, help Benjamin Netanyahu get to an appropriate resolution of this Gaza war. And what does that mean? It means a resolution that does not leave Hamas in power in Gaza and does not leave Hamas as a viable terrorist organization. I don't think Netanyahu will settle for anything less, and I don't think Trump is going to pressure him to accept anything less.
No, well, look, Trump's been very firm on this from the very beginning, and obviously those negotiations are still open. So you're right. Let's see what happens here. Now, US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has fired the head of the Pentagon's intelligence agency and 2 other senior military commanders. It comes just weeks after the White House rebuked a review assessing the impact of American strikes on Iran. John, I guess, what choice did Hegseth have here? Because the head of the intelligence agency essentially cast doubt over the administration's own strikes.
Yeah, this guy was the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, one of a number of intelligence agencies that we have. He was a general named Jeffrey Cruz. And right after those Iranian airstrikes, he put out this ridiculous intelligence report saying that he thought they had done very little damage. Now, that's absurd. It's contradicted by every other assessment by everybody all around the world. They did terrific damage. What's going on here is that the military bureaucracy and the intelligence bureaucracy have both been taken over by woke liberals. And Pete Hegseth knows all about this. He actually wrote a book about it, how wokeism was taking over the highest levels of the Department of Defense. And that's one of the reasons why President Trump made him Secretary of Defense, because Trump wants him to clear out this woke dead wood. These are guys who never fought a war, but are there pursuing these liberal DEI policies and so on. So we're going to see more of this. There are more people at the top of the military establishment as well as at the top of some of these intelligence agencies who need to go, and I think we'll see some more firings.
Yeah, wouldn't surprise me at all. You can tell that Pete Hegseth is really getting it done and clearing out that department, and good on him, I say. Now, the New York Times has done a special investigation into Chinese meddling and influence in campaigns. It's found, quote, the Chinese government wields its influence in New York politics through diaspora organisations that are usually organised around people from the same village, city or province in China. It goes on to say Chinese diplomats at the country's New York consulate on Manhattan's West Side were in constant communication with leaders of these groups. John, how concerning is this?
It's interesting, Danica, because as you know, in our political life, there's been a lot of talk about Russian influence on our elections, and that's been way overstated. I think the much more serious question is Chinese influence, not just in local elections in New York City, but in many other ways. We know that the Chinese have heavily influenced American universities by giving them a lot of money, which is supposed to be reported by law, but often has not been reported. That's been really insidious. We know that the Red Chinese have placed spies in high places. So, for example, Senator Dianne Feinstein for years had a driver who was with her every day, turned out to be a Chinese spy. A prominent Democratic congressman had a girlfriend who had almost certainly was the Chinese spy. And so we had the Chinese spy satellite drifting across the United States during the Biden administration, and they wouldn't shoot it down. So there's a lot of reason to think that China is spying. China is exerting political influence. China is trying to influence our academic institutions to be friendly to it. And I think we need a really much broader, across-the-board understanding of these efforts and response to those efforts.
Yeah, I completely agree. As you said, I mean, normally we think about Russia, but gee, China is certainly a worry right now. John Hinderaker, it's great to catch up with you again. Thank you so much for joining us on the show this evening.